Okay. Hey guys, what's up? My name's Bailey and welcome to my channel. Today I'm talking about the 36 books that I read in January. I want to give a disclaimer. I am not a loser. I don't think so. But it's COVID and I don't have that many hobbies. So here we are. I also was not doing this for any sort of challenge. I just happened to read a lot. And a lot of these were very short books, so I'm not trying to be competitive here, just being me. So this is gonna be a very long video, so I'll go ahead and get into them. So the first book that I read this year was The Death of Vivian Gy. This book was phenomenal in the writing, was incredible. I ended up giving it, I don't remember if it was a 4 or 4.5. It's hard to explain this book, but it's really just about identity, about family, about relationships. It was beautiful and the story was great. I know a lot of people cried. I don't really cry at books, but it was sad. It was sad. There's like a relationship that happens in this book that I did not like. Every time that came up, I was just kind of put off from that. Other than that, a fantastic book. And if you have seen this floating around like I have all over Instagram, all over BookTube, if you're at all interested, if it all intrigues you, pick it up because I don't think you'll regret it. The next book that I read was Brown Girl Dream by Jacqueline Woodson. I read this for the Buzzwordathon pick for the month of January. The word was dream. So Brown Girl Dreaming is Jacqueline Woodson's like middle grade memoir. It was super good. Ended up giving this 4. Fantastic book. Highly recommend it. The next book that I read was Empress of Salt and Fortune by Vo. Wow. Amazing. Amazing book. This book, I wish I had it. I wish I owned it. Because it's like so short. It's like 100 pages. And what she did there. What she did there. Fantastic. So powerful. And just like amazing queer women doing their thing. We love it. That wasn't a great explanation, but we're gonna go with it. The next book that I read was Us Against You by Frederick Bachman. This on audiobook. And I read Beartown in 2020. Is one of my favorite books of the year. And wow, this one just topped it because Beartown was great. Us Against You just brings it to a whole new level. Us Against You is about basically the aftermath of what happens in Beartown, about a hockey team. And I'm not a sports person, but I love sports books. So this is a win for me. It blew my mind. It's incredible. And rumor has it there's a 3rd book coming out. So I'm ready for that. The next book that I read was We Ride Upon Sticks by Quan Berry. I read this because Kayla from Books and Lala, this was like her favorite book of the year. It sounded very intriguing. And then my library got it like the next day after I watched that video. So I was like, clearly it's fate. This was a 5 out of 5. Like, no question. Amazing. Amazing. This is basically about a girls field hockey team in 1989. Not a very good hockey team, so they decided to enlist with some dark forces and it's just so much fun, like witchcraft and like 80s 90s references and a cool amazing group of women. I'm absolutely here for it. So amazing book. Highly recommend. The next book that I read was What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Fat by Aubrey Gordon, also known as Your Fat Friend on Medium and other social medias. Fantastic book, 5 out of 5 nonfiction. Really hope more people pick this up. All about just how anti-fatness is so ingrained in our society and ingrained in our environment, and just how like thin privilege, like half those things like I've never really thought about, and so it was super interesting, really educational for me. The writing is super accessible, so I know some nonfiction can be a little too theoretical, and I really like this one. It's like a blogger, so she very much kept it conversational, so I love that one. The next book that I read was The Daughter of Wise. It's a graphic novel about two sisters. It's based on this Celtic folktale. It was interesting. I mean, it does follow the folktale very closely, so the way that ended, I was kind of like, huh. But it was pretty fun though. Pretty fun read, very quick read. I don't remember what I rated this. I think it was a 4 or 3.5 because I did enjoy it, but wasn't outstanding by any means for me. Now the art was outstanding. What a fantastic illustrator. The next books I read was Check Please, number 1 and number 2. This follows this gay boy who has always, I think he always like figure skated, but now he's on this hockey team at supposed to be kind of an Ivy League-esque school. I've just really been on the hockey kick lately, what can I say? The first one I knew from the beginning, I mean, if you look this up, you know that it's gay, and which is why I wanted to read it. And it was fun. The first one I feel like was more about like brotherhood of the team, and I really enjoyed that aspect. But the relationship, personally for me, I did not really see coming. I knew it was gonna happen because I had read about the book, but if I just like picked this up on a whim, I would not have guessed that because it was just kind of just didn't really see it coming. I did enjoy the second book a lot more, so I gave that one a 4. I did enjoy it, but I know there's like such a cult following with this book series, but personally for me, I just like didn't really connect with the characters, but I do still think it was super cute. And if gay hockey interests you, you should definitely pick it up. Next, I read In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. If you don't know, this book is about Carmen's relationship with her ex-girlfriend and was super abusive and toxic. Because she's in a queer relationship, like that abuse isn't really talked about in the queer community. They're just kind of bringing that to light. It alternates between first person perspective and second person, which is why I started the audiobook and I ended up having to go to the physical version because the audiobook, when I went to second person, was just a little too intense for me because she's narrating everything that happened to her as like this happened to you. That was just a little too much for me. I do recommend the audiobook if you can handle it because it was really incredible. She reads it herself. Yeah, I finished with the physical book. Incredible book, 5 out of 5, no question. Book's been everywhere, and I'm so glad that I picked it up because amazing. The next book that I read was Kim Jiyoung, born 1982. It was very interesting, goes through like this woman's life. There's like footnotes, I guess, throughout where something will happen to her, like maybe she is passed over for promotion at her job because she's a woman, and there'll be a footnote that says like this happens to so many women in South Korea every year, and that was really like interesting, that blend of narrative and history. But personally, I think I rated this like a 3.5. It wasn't the story was super engaging, and then the last like 10 pages, it just like switches perspective and it doesn't talk about her anymore, and it's like her therapist, and I guess it's supposed to show like the dismissal of women's experiences. I guess supposed to highlight like the like structural things that make people who are marginalized have mental illness at higher rates. I guess I just like didn't really get a lot out of this book, but I did find it like an entertaining time. The next book that I read was Weather by Jenny Awful. Unfortunate last name. This was a fortunate book. This was quite fun. I rated this like a 4. Wasn't a favorite, but really enjoyed it. I thought it was set in the future, but then I looked on Goodreads like 10 minutes ago and it's apparently contemporary, so what do I know? But in the book, what's happening is like the effects of climate change are really starting to affect the weather. So the weather's super unpredictable. That was super interesting to read because I feel like that's already starting to happen. It's kind of a quiet book. It's following a lot of different threads and doesn't really go into any of them in depth, and it's not told linearly, which I really enjoy. I love like non-linear narratives, so that was really cool. Nothing really happens. It kind of feels like the calm before the storm weather, and that was really like fun. It was really entertaining and really makes you think about especially after seeing it was contemporary, I'm kind of like, is this calm before the storm? And it really makes you think both about physically like climate change as well as like just all of the things happening in our social world, and like when is the storm, or is it already here? Really enjoyed that one. Highly recommend it. The next book that I read was The Skin We're In by Desmond Cole. This is a really important book all about anti-blackness in Canada, and it follows a year. It follows 2017. It just goes through each month and talks about different things that were happening each month. It was super engaging. I especially like that format because it would say like in January this police brutality incident happened, and now we're going to talk about like statistically how much this happens. In June, we're going to talk about how like anti-blackness within Pride and Toronto Pride, and then we're going to talk about like the queer community in general. So I really like that format, and I found this really engaging and interesting. I'm not Canadian. I just like wanted to pick it up. Super important read. So if you're interested, especially if Canadian or North American, highly recommend picking this one up. The next book that I read was Wintering by Catherine May. This was a fantastic book. It was so funny. Just so much fun to read. Basically about embracing winter, and like in summer, you know, we can go to bed at 11 and wake up at sunrise at 6, and winter, just like embracing the fact that we may need more sleep, we may need more downtime, and we should just embrace that. It's kind of a like hygge adjacent book, but it doesn't like actually endorse any of those things. Instead, she kind of looks broadly at all sorts of different cultures, specifically in like Norway, Denmark, and Sweden, different communities, and just talking about like how different communities prepare for winter. That was just really interesting, and it was kind of a mix of like that facts and history with her own experience of going through a really difficult winter herself, and just it was really fun. Also, this cover, so beautiful. I don't usually like orange covers, but I'll make an exception for this one because it's truly beautiful. The next book that I read was Be Gay Do Comics. This was so much fun. It's an anthology of all these different queer comic artists. It's a fantastic anthology. There's some history, there's like personal narratives, there's comedy, just anything you could want, and it was super fun to read. Introduced me to a lot of different new comics, and that I'll be looking out for in the future, so I'm really excited to read more from some of these people. The next book that I read was The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. Okay, I feel like I'm definitely in the minority on this one. I know, I've seen the Goodreads reviews, but I did not really like, this one was fun. I think I gave it like a 3.5. There's nothing wrong with it. Writing was good, the story was fun, but I know like a lot of people like love this book. It's like their favorite romance book. And maybe just because it was so hyped, but I was just so underwhelmed. I was like, this is all. I think I would have liked it more if we had gotten more from, what's the guy's name? Jack? I hope that's right. We'd got more from his perspective. I think I would have enjoyed it more. I don't know. It just felt a little too heterosexual for me. So that's that with that. The next book that I read was Don't Call Us Dead by Inez Smith. Amazing book. I really love them. Homie, one of their other poetry collections, was one of my favorite books of last year. So really love this one. I love that all of the poems connected back to this idea of dead and death and premature death. It's a fantastic book. I also listened to this on audiobook while I physically read it. That just enhanced the experience so much. It felt like I was at a poetry reading. Loved it. Next, I read one of my favorite books, possibly of the year, I'll call it now, was my autobiography of Carson McCullers by Jen Shepland. Wow, this book was incredible. I think this is just like probably just because this converges so many of my interests. But basically, this book is all about Jen Shepland's journey of, she used to work in like this archive, and she came across all these letters of Carson McCullers and like love letters from Carson to this other woman and vice versa, and they're like, this seems gay. And basically she takes us down this amazing rabbit hole of learning all about Carson McCullers' life and just how big of a lesbian she was. Amazing. And while we're at it, we're also getting kind of a memoir of Shepland. So this was like twofer. Amazing book. I really love like feminist archival scholarship, and I love lesbians, so fantastic book. Next, I read One by One by Ruth Ware. This was fun. I know this is kind of divisive. Some people thought this was like too predictable. Personally, I'm not a huge thriller reader. I want to get more into it, but for now, I haven't read that many, so I had no idea what to expect. So I was shocked. And even if you do find it predictable, I think it's still like a great one to recommend because it was so atmospheric, especially to read in the winter. And you're reading about like the ski resort and avalanche, and it was just incredible. This was a fun one. Next, I read Laziness Does Not Exist by Devin Price. This was quite fun. I think I gave this like a 4. It was a little too pop psychology for me, but I still really enjoy it. And it's basically just all about how laziness isn't real and capitalism is terrible and has conditioned our brains to think that we need to be doing stuff all the time. So I really like this, and I wish more people could read it and comprehend it. Next, I read How to They Them by Stuart Getty. This one was fun. It's a little graphic novel guide to they them pronouns. I did enjoy it, but I don't remember what I rated this. I think maybe a 3.5. I wanted to like it more, but I felt like it was just a little too simplistic for me. Like, I get the idea is supposed to be like about they them pronouns, but I feel like they also kind of made it feel like all gender nonconforming people use they them, which is untrue. So I didn't love that, and I also was just kind of confused on what the age range was supposed to be for this book. I think it'd be a great like buddy read for like a parent and child. I've seen that suggested in another review that I watched, because I don't think I would give this to like a literal child because some of the illustrations, but then like as an adult some things felt really not even necessarily childish, but just kind of like common sense. So I was just kind of confused on who it was for. But I do think if this seems like something that would be educating for you, I guess I would recommend it. The author is trans, so that is always a good thing. But maybe check out some other resources and see what else sparks your interest. Next, I read The Storied Life of A.J. Vickery by Gabrielle Zevin. I was like really excited for this book. It's been on my TBR for way too long, and I'm like, cute, like a bookstore story. I was just kind of underwhelmed because it was cute, but I didn't find it all that powerful. It wasn't really saying anything that hasn't already been said. There's so much that I think could have been said, and there could have been some great social commentary on things like racism and like who belongs in places And that wasn't really discussed, so that made me sad. Next, I read The Dutch House by Anne Patchett. I ended up rating the book 4 stars. It was very enjoyable, super juicy story if you like books about like family drama. So I really like that aspect, and the audiobook is a 5 out of 5 because Tom Hanks narrates it and it was super fun. I just like wanted to keep listening to his voice. So I did enjoy this one. It wasn't a favorite, but highly recommend if family drama is your thing. Next, I read The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. This was a difficult read. It's all about trauma. It was also super interesting. Have never taken a psychology class in my life, but I find it really interesting to read about. This is a long boy, so keep that in mind. But it read really fast for me because there was just so many different things that like he was talking about that I just found really interesting and engaging. So I recommend this one. Because it's talking about trauma, there is probably every trigger warning that you think could be in here is probably here. So I would definitely keep that in mind if you're thinking about reading it. Next, I read The Princess Saves Herself in This One by Amanda Lovelace. Dare I say, the worst book I'll read this year. So 1 star, my friends. Yeah, this was just not good. I feel like the poetry in here is something I don't want to like insult her because she seems like such a nice person, but I'm like, girl, you can't write. It felt like I was reading random sentences from what I say in therapy and then pressing enter a bunch of random times, and then you would get this book. So did not love it, would not recommend. If you would like a fun poetry book, may I interest you in Rocket Fantastic by G. Cavalcaresi. Next, I read The Deep by Rivers Solomon. What a fantastic book. So short, and yet it takes you so many places. This book is basically a kind of reimagining of the pregnant women that were thrown off of the slave ships during the transatlantic slave trade and their children growing up to become mermaids. And it's all about generational trauma and about trauma in general and remembering and loss and love, and it is so beautiful. It is so beautiful. Next, I read I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. This book, so I'm still really conflicted on how to rate this book because the writing was superb. And up until the last like 10 pages, I was like, this is a 5 out of 5. This is so creepy. The back says like, you'll be scared, but you won't know why. And I was like, I am scared and I don't know why. And so that was incredible. But then the way it ended, like, I know for a lot of people, they're like, this fucked me up. But for me, I was like, it just felt kind of lazy to me how it ended. Hot take. I was just kind of underwhelmed by the ending. Reading it, it feels like Get Out mixed with like Hereditary, and I was like, wow, incredible. Can't wait to see how this all pulls together. And then the way it did made it really disappointing to me. I would say I give that like a 3 or 3.5 maybe, because it was a very enjoyable and entertaining read, but the ending was just so unsatisfying. Next, I'll just go ahead and talk about the Chronicles of Narnia. I'm gonna do a full discussion video because I've only read the first 4 books, so I'm hoping to read the next 3 this month, and then I'll do a full video kind of recapping the whole series. Basically, my thoughts, I'm reading them in chronological order. So, Magician's Nephew, fun. Kind of like Ballads of Songbirds and Snakes. I've read it, but I feel like it has that energy. Like, do we need it? No. But do we get it? Yeah. Like a 3.5 or a 4. It was enjoyable to read, but I just don't think it was necessary. Next, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Please excuse my movie cover book. This is like the classic one. I'd give it a 4, 4.5. It was very fun. It was very enjoyable. This one I read as a kid, so there's a lot of things I remembered. You know, it was alright, but I didn't love it. Next, I read The Horse and His Boy. This one, kind of unrelated to the other books. It follows like brand new characters and they're like journeying, and I like the journey aspect. I did. And it's kind of gay. Not actually, but it has gay energy, but it's also like full of so many like racist depictions, and so that made me very uncomfortable to read. Yeah, it just was like not entertaining. It was honestly kind of a struggle to read it because it was just kind of, so much of it was going on this journey and it was so boring. 3. Then lastly, I have Prince Caspian. This one is a gem. This is the best book in this series I've read so far. Granted, it's the last 3. This one, I really loved that this one takes place like way in the future from when we first saw Narnia in these 2 books. Like Narnia was just created, where this one takes place way in the future. Very like interesting conversations around like colonization. I thought that was interesting, as well as like the story was by far the most entertaining of the ones I've read so far. So overall, pretty good, pretty solid. I'd say 4.5. Next, I read Even This Page is White by Vickery. This was Greek poetry collection. It's all about whiteness and racism. Vivek grew up in Canada, in Edmonton, and it's just a really interesting read. I enjoyed it. I highly recommend it. Next, I read Critical Race Theory: An Introduction by Richard Delgado and Jean Stefanik. This book, when they say an introduction, they mean an intro. So I did like it. Some things they said did feel a bit basic. I did think that the actual information was pretty good, like their definitions, but there's just a lot that I did not like. And I read this for class, for my critical race theory class. There's definitely some very problematic things. There's a lot of discussion questions that I was kind of like, what? Or they'll have like classroom exercise and give like this really terrible example and be like, discuss. And I'm like, excuse me? So I enjoy this. If you're interested in critical race theory, this I would recommend as a content book because it is gives a very good introduction. That's just kind of like talks about the different tenets and application, and super cheap because it runs like $13 usually. So, but overall, yeah, I felt like it was pandering to fragile white college students a little too much, and I was not here for that at all. So interesting. Next, I read She of the Mountains by Vivek Shraya. This is like a prose that goes back and forth between the story. I think it's somewhat autobiographical. It is about like this boy struggling with his sexuality and trying to figure out who he is. And then there's also a component that it alternates between that and like Hindu folklore. So that was really interesting to read. Love it, and I think I gave this 4. Next, I read God Loves Hair by Vivek Shraya. I was really on a kick. I read this on audiobook. It's on Spotify and didn't take too long and was just really cute. I really enjoyed it, and it was super fun, and definitely recommend the 10th anniversary edition for sure. And lastly, we're at the last book finally. I read Range by David Epstein. What a fantastic book, all about how generalist, carrot, I don't know if this is going the right way, much better than being specialized. It's so important to have breadth and have an understanding and knowledge outside of your narrow field of expertise. Not that it's bad to be an expert in something. This idea that you have to start at age 3 and accumulate 10,000 hours and train only in one thing is complete bullshit. And I really like that he laid that out. Fantastic. I think will be one of my favorite nonfiction of 2021. With that, if you stuck with this video all the way through, thank you. Don't forget to like and comment below what your favorite book of 2021 so far is. If you like this video, please subscribe, and I will be posting more regularly now that I have a tripod. So I'll see you in the next one. Bye!